Welcome back. Today's episode might hit a little differently. Today we're diving into the guilt, yes, the guilt, of not being a parent. Whether it's by choice, by chance, or by a heartbreaking circumstance, not being a parent can carry its own emotional weight. There's a kind of grief that's hard to explain, and a guilt that often goes unspoken. For some, the guilt is tied to choice. They never felt the pull to become a parent, but society told them that they had to, that that's what an adult does. Adulthood equals parenthood. Like you would be selfish if you chose otherwise, or you're broken, or you're disappointing all the people around you that you loved, even if you're at peace with your decision. And for others, it's the unspoken grief of wanting kids, but not being able to have them. Whether that's due to infertility, illness, or other circumstances like miscarriage, that guilt is layered. It's because your body isn't working the way it's supposed to, the way you hoped, for not being able to give a child to your partner, to make your parents grandparents. Your life that you thought you were supposed to have and hoped for is no longer that life. You're not fulfilling that role that you thought you were meant to be. And then there's all that guilt about navigating life after loss. Parents who lost a child, people who were caregivers and then never got the chance to watch their child grow up to have kids of their own. All of this guilt is real, and it's layered, and it's hard, and it all deserves to be heard. The guilt that people don't see is how exhausting it is. It's mentally and emotionally draining to keep explaining your decision, to make up stories to protect your privacy, or to dodge the awkward questions from coworkers, aunts, or old people in the grocery store, or to even lie to your family members so that they're not disappointed. All of that is a performance, and all of that weighs you down every single day. If you're someone who's asked, "So when are you two having kids?" or "Who's going to take care of you when you're older?" or maybe you said, "Don't worry, you'll change your mind. You're missing out on life's greatest joy." This part is for you, and I say this with all the love in my heart. Please stop. It is uncomfortable and unnecessary. You never know what someone is going through and what is going on behind their smile or what their why is. Imagine this. You just asked one of those questions and maybe they just had a miscarriage. Maybe they're going through IVF treatment and it's not working. Maybe their partner passed away. Maybe they've made peace with not having children, but they're still grieving the life that they thought they were going to have. How does that make you feel? I would bet it doesn't feel great. None of the reasons why they don't have children, they're not having more children, so on and so forth, is anybody's business but theirs. If it's offered to you, take it. Think before you speak. Lead with kindness and let the people live their lives even though it may look different from your own. Up next, you're going to hear a heartfelt story from one of our listeners who wrote in, who experienced 2 losses of her own and then had a live birth on top of it. She's going to touch points on the layers of guilt that she felt both through the loss and through the live birth. So without further ado, here we go. I'm Allie. If you just want to introduce yourself real quick.
Hi, I'm Jessica Gunn.
All right, perfect. So we'll just get right into the questions here. So can you share your journey with parenthood and how that looked for you in the beginning and how it looks now?
Yes, my journey towards parenthood started off kind of rocky. I lost my first pregnancy and I was completely blindsided by it. I was very naive about how often that happens. So it definitely took me by surprise, which I'm sure is relatable. And then I experienced some secondary infertility. So it was a long time between that pregnancy and my next one. And then that second pregnancy did result in a live birth, and I have a toddler now. And I have since experienced another pregnancy loss. So I've had a very up and down roller coaster of becoming a parent.
Right. And what kind of emotions? I can imagine they're also up and down, with everything. Can you just explain some of the emotions maybe you felt towards parenthood? Because I'm sure I know for me, it was like, oh, parenthood's going to be great. This is wonderful. But sometimes there is hidden emotions behind that.
Yeah, it's hard to label just a few. I feel like I would imagine with any journey towards parenthood, there are a lot of emotions, but I know that with mine, it was pretty much all of them. There's a lot of ups and downs for my pregnancy that resulted in my live birth. I was in denial for most of it because I was afraid to get attached, afraid to think ahead and picture having a baby in my life. So there was a lot of avoiding feelings during that time. And I think I believed that maybe things would get easier if maybe there was a child and I could get past some of that. Turns out having them on the outside of me did not erase any of the anxiety that I felt and possibly even amplified it a little bit. So I think there were also some delayed feelings because of the denial. And so, yeah, up and down and all over the place. And I think I also lost myself a little bit in becoming my child's mother.
Right.
I didn't expect to. I didn't think I was going to get to keep my baby. And it kind of became my whole identity once I did. And I got to bring them home and be their mother. And that is just who I became. And it has taken me, well, I'm still working on it actually, but a very long time to try and dig myself out of that and find who I am again.
Right. And since this episode is going to be about guilt, can you tell me maybe the first time you felt guilt and kind of what that encompassed?
The first time was shortly after I learned about my first loss. I felt a lot of guilt. I, again, was really naive to how common miscarriage is. You hear about it. I knew that it happened to people, but I never believed it would happen to me. And so shortly after learning about my loss, I started wondering what I did wrong, how it was my fault, what I could have done differently, what I promised myself I would do differently if I managed to get pregnant again. And despite the fact that I now know a lot more about, well, we don't really know why, but how often it happens and that there are a multitude of reasons why it might happen, I still struggle with that guilt.
Right. And I personally have never been through that, but I know a lot of people who have. And you're right. That's not talked about. I mean, it happens, but how common it is not something that is talked about openly. And it wasn't until I started having children and the people around me started having children did I realize, like, wow, this actually touches way more people than we're led to believe. And unfortunately, I think it's just one of those things that we, for some reason, just don't speak about. And I'm really sorry that you had to go through that.
Thank you. We don't speak about it enough. And it's understandable because it's a hard subject to speak about. And you're always wondering if maybe that person's having a good day and you're going to bring it all back up for them. Or there's a lot of reasons why we avoid it. And it is understandable. But when we avoid it, we leave a lot of people alone in their experiences. And that's sad.
Right. So how have you mentioned after your first loss, you had secondary infertility issues. What were the emotions with that?
Again, more just me being naive. When my husband and I decided that we were going to try the first time, I got pregnant right away. So I just assumed that's how it was going to happen again. And when it didn't, I fell into some pretty unhealthy spirals around tracking and hiding pregnancy tests and all kinds of fun things, and more guilt about what I was doing wrong. It was a crazy time.
Right. And I think, for anybody, whether you have children or you don't, whether you want them or you don't, I think that everyone's like, well, you're an adult. You're supposed to have children. You're supposed to have a family. Like, that's what you do. But maybe that's not what we have to do, right? Maybe we're not, for whatever reason, we're not meant to have children. We just can't do that. Or for whatever reason, we don't want children. I think that we need to start moving, that societal pressure that just because you're an adult doesn't mean that you have to be a parent. And I can imagine that, I've heard stories of people who have went through loss or maybe infertility, or even people who don't want kids, that constant pressure from their peers, from their family members, from whomever. And did you ever experience that? Like, when are you guys going to try again? When are you going to have children? Anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, the people closest to me, obviously, not as much pressure, but still a lot of questions about those sorts of things. And anybody who didn't know about my loss was absolutely all over, like, well, when are you guys going to start a family? And when is it happening? And I do feel like I actually have gotten more pressure since having my child. Now, I guess I've proven that I'm capable of it or something. People are less shy about asking when I'm going to give them a sibling. And yeah, there's just been a lot more pressure to have more and not just stop with where I'm at.
Right. And personally, I have 3 children, but 2 of them are my stepchildren. So our last one, I gave birth to her. And a lot of people continue to ask me when I'm having another. And I said, I have 3. I don't need any more. Like, I'm good. But she's 4 now. And I would say probably just this last year, I was finally able to start vocalizing, like, no, I'm done. Like, I don't care if I'm hurting your feelings. I don't care if you're upset because I'm not having another one. Like, you're not the one that has to go through it. You're not the one here helping me raise her or them or whatever it will be. And, like, this is my life, ultimately. And in the beginning, it was like, oh my gosh, we need to have another baby right away. Like, everyone says, oh, you're going to make a sibling, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, but again, not your life. I'm the one who has to deal with it. I'm the one who has to go through everything. And I just wish that people would just be a little bit more cognizant of when they say things, because I'm sure 90% of the people that are asking us have probably felt that same way at some point. Like, why are these people asking me this?
Yeah.
So
True.
It's just one of those things.
Well, and you also never know what that person's story is. Like, when I get people telling me that I can't stop at 1 because my child's going to be spoiled because they're an only child, they don't know if I've been trying, or I've been experiencing infertility, or that I had another loss, or any of those things. You don't know what someone's story is. And yeah, it can be a painful thing to bring up for people, but despite the fact that it's just annoying. And then on the other hand, like, I feel like a lot of the people who do ask those sorts of questions either have never been pregnant, are a man and are never going to be pregnant, or had really easy pregnancies or something, and just aren't really taking into account all of the things that your body gets put through during pregnancy. I'm still reeling from some of the health side effects that came from having my baby. So there are a lot of different things to consider, and most people don't think about those before they ask those questions.
Right. So obviously you don't really get over something that like you've experienced, but how have you found ways to work through it?
For me, the main thing has been actually I started a blog about it. I I don't feel like we talk about loss enough. And I didn't find the community that I think would have helped me, especially during my pregnancy, any of my pregnancies, really, when I was going through it. So I have decided that I want to try and create that for people. So I started a blog and I am starting a Facebook group. I'm going to try and create some community for people who do feel isolated and alone in their experiences. I have an amazing support system around me. I've got wonderful people in my life, but not all of them fully understand what I went through. And I just feel like that's so important for people. And I've also gone through training to become a peer supporter. So I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to offer support groups where we can just get together and really be in a community of people who understand what we've gone through. And for me, I've found that to be really cathartic, and I've learned a lot, done a lot of research, and been able to shine a different light on my losses and my journey through my full pregnancy.
Right. And honestly, I think that's great. And I know it's probably scary and hard to put everything out there, but like we keep saying, there's just so many people, and a lot of it's kept behind closed doors. And it's just really nice sometimes to hear that you're not the only one.
Yeah. So even if there's people who don't want to speak or tell their story and they're not ready or they never will be, that's absolutely fine. But being around people who understand, even if you're going to keep quiet, is still often really beneficial. So I'm hoping that I can create that safe space for people.
And what would you say to anybody who's maybe struggling with this silent sort of guilt?
It'd be really easy just to say it's not your fault, but it can be really hard to convince someone of that. It wouldn't have worked on me. I do think that finding the community is really important, even just validation for the things that you're going through or the things that you're feeling that you feel like you shouldn't be feeling. Knowing that you're not the only one can be really helpful. So I guess what I would say to them is find your people. You don't have to go through it alone.
Where can people find your blog?
My website is called thethingaboutRainbows.com. And then if they wanted to check out things like the Facebook group, it's the same URL, just with a /Facebook on the end. So thethingaboutRainbows.com/Facebook. I've got my blog on there, and I've got some free resources for finding healthcare providers who understand, because I feel like that's a big barrier. My first experience did not go well, and then I had very good healthcare for my second pregnancy, and I think that made a world of difference. So I've got some free resources for things like that, and building a good support system around yourself, even if the people around you don't understand. So there's the blog and then some resources, and I'm trying to add to that all the time so that there are guides, I guess, in place, because my biggest issue during my pregnancy was I just didn't know what to do. The denial came in and shut out everything else, and I couldn't look forward because that was scary. I didn't really want to look backwards because that brought up a whole bunch of things that made forward feel scary too. So I lived very much in the moment and was fully unprepared to bring a baby home as a result. So I just want to try and build some resources for people who are where I was and need some guidance during that time.
So how do you think that your experiences has shaped you for becoming a parent and bringing that child home?
It definitely added to the anxiety. I'm fairly certain I probably would have worried about things like SIDS and those sorts of things anyway, but not to the level that I took it. There is not really a comfort because you don't know it's there, but there's no way to unlearn that pregnancy does not equal baby. So once you've learned that, you can't put that genie back in the bottle, and it's not a guarantee. And that doesn't go away just because you've given birth and that baby is now there. They are now also a living, breathing thing on the outside that you have to protect from everything. The anxiety is crushing. And the risks for things like postpartum anxiety and depression and other perinatal mood and anxiety disorders is higher for people who have experienced a previous loss. And working through that anxiety is still something that I'm working on. So I guess maybe it might set you up to make sure your child definitely lives. But it definitely adds a layer of difficulty for sure. The intrusive thoughts, which I know a lot of moms can experience, were rampant and have lessened now that my child is a little bit older, but they are still there. They're still something that I struggle with, which leads into a fun circle of guilt about trying not to keep them in a bubble and letting them live. So there's layers of guilt everywhere that are just waiting to fall on you.
Right. And sometimes it's hard to remember, that we are doing the best we can with what we know and what we've been through. And just because we're guilty doesn't mean we're doing something bad. It just means that we care. I think, there are different types of guilt. Either the guilt that what I would say toxic, I suppose, that guilt that we completely let consume us. It does no good for anybody or anything. But then the guilt that keeps you safe, the guilt that keeps your family safe, the guilt that keeps you moving, that kind of guilt, I think is something that is needed to grow, especially as a mom. I think I haven't experienced loss, but I've had some of the same thoughts. What am I doing wrong? What did I do wrong? Is this my fault? Am I doing this right? I just think that just one of those things. And again, I wasn't prepared for that. I came into 2 stepchildren and I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I don't have to deal with the sleepless nights, nothing. Nope. Guilt there too, because now I'm living, breathing proof that their parents are apart. I wasn't there from the beginning. I didn't think that I would have that sort of guilt, that I hadn't been there from the time they were open their eyes to now. So, I think the takeaway of this is no matter what your track to parenthood is, or even maybe not to parenthood, I think that at some sort of level we all can relate to each other, and we all should really be trying to lean on each other versus bringing each other down or asking those stupid annoying questions like, when are you having another one, or when are you even having your first one?
Yeah, there are just so many shoulds in the world, and I feel like there's an extra layer of them put on women, and then an added layer on mothers. And there can be the ones of when are you going to become a parent, and then once you are a parent, if that's a choice that you make, there are all of the shoulds around what you should be doing for that child to make sure that they're the best versions of themselves. When that's already something that we as mothers are working on, there are just so many opinions about how that should be achieved. So we get them from our families, from our in-laws, we get them from social media. They just come at us from all angles, and they really grow the ones inside us that were already there. They add to those and make them bigger. And then when you don't live up to those, you get the guilt. And there are a lot of shoulds that we just need to let go of. Easier said than done.
It is very much easier said than done. Sometimes I wish I could just wave a magic wand and we all get over it, but not the case. Is there anything that you would like to speak on or say that maybe we haven't touched on, or anything you want to leave with the listeners?
I think we talked a little bit about like what we wish people would stop asking, and things like that. And I feel like another layer to that is, if you are going to ask questions like that because you are coming from a good place, or at least you feel like you are, that there just should be some more intention behind it, some more thought. I think those questions end up coming, somehow they got added in with small talk. We talk about the weather, and then we ask people about their reproductive choices, which is very strange to me because it's deeply personal. And what I don't want to say that we should just never talk about those things, because again, I don't want to leave people alone and isolated if they are really wishing they could talk about it, but nobody else seems to want to. So there are places for those conversations. I just think we might need to remove those questions from the small talk category and be more intentional and be more prepared for the answer. Because there have been times when people just throw it out there like, oh, it's hot today. They are not prepared for the gravity of my answer, which makes things really awkward for everyone involved. And that could all be avoided if we just maybe stop and think about those questions a little bit more and try to approach them with a little bit more care.
I think that's a really good point, because, like you said, that you're right, for whatever reason, that is like the small talk when you're standing in line at the grocery store, and even like the old man behind you is like, oh, they're so cute, when are you having another? And you're like, I don't even know you.
Right. Yes.
So that is a very good point. And also, you're right, if you're asking me a question, you better be prepared for my answer. And if you're not prepared for that answer because we're standing in the middle of a checkout line, then maybe you shouldn't have asked it.
No.
And you're right, it is more of an intimate question. You wouldn't just, again, back to the grocery store, we really shouldn't just be asking people that out in the open, because sometimes these questions are questions that you need to be fully focused and fully ready to listen. Not even give advice, but to listen.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, the advice. The other fun part of it. Ask a question you probably shouldn't have asked, and then when you're freaking out because you don't know what to do with the answer, maybe don't let your default response to be to start telling people what to do.
Right. Exactly. Because you've probably already been there, done that. Yeah, it's very difficult. I know that talking about it is probably not easy. So thank you for being brave enough to tell us our story, and then we're also branching out and making resources available for women who've went through this also. But I do think that this will resonate with a lot of women. And again, thank you, and I'm so sorry for what you have been dealing with, but I really appreciate you talking about it.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. It's not the most comfortable topic, but I do think that is a reason why so many people get left alone in it. So if me talking about it could help someone, I want to lean into that.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what my thoughts would be. Just the thoughts I have right now, what my thoughts would be if I actually experienced that and then having to go through it silently. So I think it is it's a big deal, both for you and then for people to hear it, and even people to hear it who haven't gone through it, because you just never know. It could be you, because you never think it will be, like you said.
Yeah, no, I definitely was not expecting it. And then one of the things that shocked me was the women who came out of the woodwork after my loss to tell me about theirs. People that I had known my whole life, and I never knew about these stories that they had. And so the community is already there. We're just not talking to each other because of how difficult this particular conversation is. And then the pregnancy after loss layer brings on a whole bunch of extra.
Yeah. Like I said, I can't even imagine, but I'm sorry. That's all I can say. I don't want to put, blind words out there because I can't. Okay. Anything else we missed or anything else you want to say?
Talking about that made me realize I didn't really touch on some of the shoulds and the guilt that come during that pregnancy after loss. Usually when you're pregnant, women are expected to be glowing, and they're supposed to be humming softly to themselves while they paint a Pinterest-worthy nursery and get everything all ready. And that was not my experience because of the denial that I was in. I wasn't happy. I wasn't excited. I wasn't any of the things that people expected me to be. And I know that that was hard for some of the people around me or strangers in the grocery store who, for some reason, think that they can just come up and touch your belly or things like that. People aren't really prepared for the lack of excitement that might come in a pregnancy after loss. That was my experience. There are probably some people who are very excited. Yay, they have a new chance at this, and I love that for them. And I hope that they can lean into that. But it's not surprising to me when I find out that someone isn't excited. They can't get there. And there's a lot of pressure to let go of the past and just focus on this baby. And you can't be so stressed out all the time because it's not good for your baby. And there's a lot of advice and shoulds that come during that pregnancy after loss that can add to the guilt that you have about your loss. And then there's guilt about if you do feel any excitement. So if you're not excited, there's guilt because you're not excited about this current baby. If you are excited, there's guilt about, like, I can't forget my previous baby. There's just this crazy line to walk that keeps moving. And I don't think a lot of people are prepared for the rapidly shifting emotions that they will go through or that the people around them are going through if they've previously lost a pregnancy.
And how do you think that the people around someone who's been through something like this and who does have these emotions that who knows which way they'll go, how do you think someone around them would be best helpful to them?
I think giving them the space to feel however they're feeling is what is going to be best. I think people are fixers. They want to fix it, especially if it's someone they care about. They really want to fix whatever it is that's hurting the person they care about who isn't their happiest self. So there's a lot of advice giving about how to just move on and be happy and just focus on now, when what would be the most helpful is just some validation that what you're going through feels hard, because it is hard. And that's okay to be in this place right now. I can sit with you in it. Far more helpful than just put on a smile and try to be happy about this baby.
Right. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and talking about this.
Thank you for having this podcast. It seems like it's a really good resource for people.
All right. Well, I hope you have a great rest of your weekend and you have some fun.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you for that honesty. That kind of truth, that's what this podcast is for. Why does this guilt show up? Let's be real. We live in a culture that idealizes parenthood. Parent equals purpose. Parent equals success. Parent equals the adulthood badge on your sash. But what happens when you don't check that box? You feel outed, and you feel like you have to justify yourself. You feel guilty for disappointing your parents, your partner, your religion, your culture, your little past self who thought that she would have 10 kids by now. Even if you're at peace about not having children, guilt can still sneak in. It's wrapped in shame and silence. And a good way to recognize this is when you're apologizing, when people ask you if you have kids, like you even need to have a reason to have children or to even apologize for not having children, or overcompensating in your career or your relationship so that you're proving that you're not selfish, feeling uncomfortable or judged at family events or baby showers or even like Mother's Day brunches, honestly, even social media, because right when we think that we're fine with our choices, someone announces they're pregnant. Or right when we think that we're okay with where we're at in our life because maybe IVF isn't working or we've experienced loss or maybe it's just not in the cards for us, someone gives birth. Or the neighbor next door moved in and they're 9 months pregnant and you get to watch that every single day. It creeps in. It's silent. And how do we loosen guilt's grip? Especially when it comes to this part of our identity. First and foremost, and probably the most important, is you are enough, with kids or without. Parenthood is not the only path that is full of love and purpose. Not having children doesn't make you selfish. Choosing what's right for you doesn't make you a failure. It's actually a deep, deep sense of self-awareness. Choosing what is right for you and not sticking to the norm shows more self-awareness and more strength than people who just go along with their life because that's what they're supposed to do. And if you're feeling grief alongside of the clarity because you are also okay with the decision you made, that's completely normal. Grief and guilt can coexist. You're allowed to mourn the life that you thought you might have with the one you currently have. And just remember that family doesn't have to follow that traditional mold. Maybe you're pouring love into your nieces, your students, your friends' kids, your dogs, your cats, your career, your art, your baking, your partner. That is love. That's real. It counts and it matters. And that should not be discredited at any point. If you're someone who has experienced loss or infertility, I see you. The guilt that comes from feeling like your body betrayed you or that you missed your chance is absolutely cruel. But it's not the truth. You are not broken and you are not alone. I know it's hard to believe that, so I'll say it again. You are not broken. And you are not alone. There is no one way to go about life. You don't have to explain or defend the shape of yours. If you felt this guilt, this invisible weight, I want you to hear this clearly. You do not need to be a parent to be complete. You do not need to explain your worth. You are enough. And sometimes just knowing someone gets it is enough to start healing. All right, that's it for today. Next week, we're exploring a different kind of guilt. Survivor guilt. Thank you for being here, for being human, and for letting yourself feel. Just a reminder, this podcast is all heart, not healthcare. Please talk to a professional for medical advice. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Unfiltered Feels Podcast. Share this with someone who needs it, or leave a review. And don't forget, the things you're feeling, you're not alone. I'll see you next time.